Welcome to the Focus and Chill podcast, where we discuss productivity tactics that work for neurodivergent individuals.
Every episode, we interview guests with lived experience of neurodiversity who also have a solid productivity and habit game, and pass the learnings on to you, our wise and benevolent audience.
We're your hosts, Jeremy and Joey.
I'm Joey, and I coach creatives to get moving on their most ambitious projects through the power of solid habits and strong focus. I'm also a perpetual student of psychology and perpetually on a quest to a one-armed chin-up.
And I'm Jeremy, a neurospicy software developer turned startup founder, building the Focus Bear app to help people with ADHD and autism thrive at work. My cool party trick is leaving parties early so I can get to sleep in time for my 2-hour-long morning routine. The Focus and Chill podcast is brought to you by Focus Bear, a focus enhancement app for ADHDers. That's adults with both combined autism and ADHD. I'm Jeremy, I'm an ADHDer myself. I'm the founder of Focus Bear and also one of the hosts of this podcast. I built Focus Bear for myself originally because I was constantly getting distracted by my phone and my laptop. I wanted a way to tame my ADHD monkey mind so I'd stop going down rabbit holes and actually get work done, but also get off my computer and my phone in the evening so I'd be able to sleep properly. It's working perfectly for me and it's helping a lot of ADHDs as well. I'd love for you to try it. It's available for Mac, Windows, iOS and Android, and it leverages most of the productivity strategies we talk about on the podcast. You can jump onto focusbear.io or just Google Focus Bear and try it out. Let me know what you think. Welcome to episode number 77 of the Focus and Chill podcast. I'm lucky to be joined by another Jeremy, Dr. Jeremy Lim today. Dr. Jeremy Lim is an experienced medical doctor and board-certified lifestyle medicine physician. He runs a solo online medical practice that utilizes multifaceted treatment modalities for patients with chronic pain and neurodivergence. Due to his lived experience and patient base, Dr. Lim is dedicated to harm reduction in ADHD patients. Welcome to the show, Dr. Lim.
Oh, thanks, Jeremy. Thank you for having us. I'm calling you Jez today, hey?
Yep, to avoid getting confused. We met at a conference
Nice.
a couple of months ago and had a really interesting conversation. So I'm really keen to talk to you today. Starting off with, in terms of your own lived experience, when did you realize that you weren't neurotypical?
That's a good question. I think from a young age, I was labeled to be quite a disruptive child by teachers. In kindergarten, they had this thing where if you weren't a good kid at school, if you were being disruptive, a teacher would write a note to your parents and staple it to your front pocket here. And what ended up happening was over time, the cloth on my pocket started to disintegrate because I was getting so many notes from the teachers. My parents sort of knew, but nobody really knew what ADHD was back then. At least growing up as a child in Singapore, the health literacy wasn't there. And I was just labeled as quite a disruptive child, I suppose.
Oh, that's an amazing image, the pocket disintegrating with all of the staples. Did it continue on into later parts of school as well? Lack of understanding and treatment by teachers?
Yeah, I guess as I grew up, I had the advantage of having a very caring and attentive dad. I couldn't pay attention in classes very well. So my dad, he would learn my school curriculum and teach it to me on the weekends. And that was really how I survived through the early part of schooling. I was very lucky to have that. I landed on my feet towards the later part of the schooling years. Struggled in university a little bit, which was, where I ended up being a psychiatrist and getting a diagnosis of ADHD around about the age of 19 to 20.
Yeah, okay. And what was that like after getting the diagnosis? Was that quite a big change?
It was indeed quite a big change. I think talking to a trained professional and getting that psychoeducation about what ADHD was, the way my brain worked, doing some research myself, there was a bit of time where I was put on stimulants for 6 months to try to treat my symptoms and improve the disorder. That was an interesting experience as well. I'd say overall, it's quite a colorful experience to describe. Everyone has their own journey in neurodivergence, and I think a lot of pain occurs as a result of it. Regardless of what's happened, I'm very lucky to be in a position today to be a doctor and to be able to help patients who struggle with this themselves.
It's so powerful that you've been through it yourself and now you're able to help other people. So it must be a lot of people, myself included, who had that type of misunderstanding growing up. And it's nice to have someone who's got your back.
Well, that's the thing about, I guess, people who understand the struggle. It's like yourself and the tools that you're working on and the projects you're working on. You're working to solving the problems you faced once upon a time. And I think that's very powerful.
Mm. What was it like in terms of, you described the teachers being quite judgmental. Were other kids also accepting, or were there social struggles too?
Yeah. We know with neurodivergence, there's the autism spectrum and the ADHD spectrum, and both groups face significant social exclusion. It's in the DSM criteria for both of them that, oftentimes they struggle with relationship building. As well, people with ADHD tend to have a bit of rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Not necessarily severe all the time. Once again, everyone is different. But having a different brain means you don't necessarily get along with everyone else or play with everyone else at a young age in the same way. And so many of these children, myself included, and maybe yourself growing up, would face social exclusion and the stigma of being a naughty kid or disruptive. That isn't easy for everyone. And I think podcasts like this do a great way. People get a better understanding of how their brains work and understand that, they're a bit different, but they still belong somewhere. They still have the right to be happy, healthy, and live a great life.
Yeah, 100%. And probably some of the things that are judged are also actually, in the right environment, the traits that can be strengths. Have you found that for yourself, that some of the things your teachers were criticizing you for, are they now almost superpowers, even though it's a bit of a cliche, that strengths that you can lean into now?
Yeah, there's that reel with that professor. I can't remember his name now, and he's describing ADHD brains like they're sports cars. As well, the whole hunter-gatherer metaphor of how potentially people with ADHD, and I could go into it in the whole dopamine hypothesis if we want, but how people with ADHD tend to sort of potentially think outside the box, potentially face things that are more of interest to them. And obviously, I think as a species, that's favorable in some ways, which is why our brains have thrived and have pushed us to today in many ways.
Absolutely.
And I think you're right, that divergence is indeed an edge to many people.
I think that maybe Professor Hollowell, who had that
Yes.
analogy. I remember from reading ADHD 2.0, the race car motor and the bicycle brakes, something like that. It's a good analogy for me in
That's right.
terms of my impulsivity.
That clip was, very inspiring to me when I first found it. And I think things like that are great. I think empowerment is the way to go, but it first comes with an understanding and an acceptance. A lot of my patients with ADHD, the comorbid rates of mood disorders, of anxiety disorders, of substance abuse is higher. And you don't get by those things easily without us having a good understanding of why they come about, of the symptomology of the way our brains work. I think the education is the way to go.
Absolutely. That probably brings us to what you're doing these days as a doctor, and some of your patients have ADHD. So how do you help them?
I run an solo online practice called Being Medical. My medical philosophy is aligned with lifestyle medicine. Lifestyle medicine is kind of an adjunct to modern medicine, wherein we utilize 6 pillars to help the patient improve their health and improve their life. 6 pillars are nutrition, sleep, exercise, relationships, stress regulation, and positive mindsets. So focusing on those 6 things, kind of like a multifaceted approach to patients who struggle with neurodivergence and those comorbidities I mentioned. Sleep disturbance is a common one, struggling with executive dysfunctioning. And all these methods of the multifaceted approach to sort of optimizing the way our brain works is certainly very empowering for my patients.
I love that holistic approach, that it's considering all of the aspects. So it sometimes feels like some of the solutions are only really treating it with a blunt instrument and not thinking about what is contributing to some of the patterns. For example, for me, why am I feeling so anxious? Part of it may actually be related to relationships and work and other causes of stress. And it's not just that I need to take anxiety medication, but I actually need to also
Yeah.
deal with those other things that are causing the situation in the first place.
I love that. The idea that it's not just a pill that will fix us, but a focus on multiple areas of our lives and a meaningful effort towards improving those areas in the way we know how.
Yeah, that sounds really important. And is it just with individuals, or do you do things with workplaces as well?
I would like to build more programs for workplace wellness. That's a project I'm working on quietly in the back in the form of lifestyle medicine. So that's something that's coming along the way, perhaps in 2025. But for right now, I'm very focused on the clinic side of things.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm really glad that you're out there able to help people. Is it mainly people in Australia, or are you able to support people in other countries as well?
For people who come to me for advice, I'm able to provide medical advice internationally because I'm board certified by the International Board of Lifestyle Medicine. However, my scripting abilities, so my abilities to write a medication script only is limited to patients in Australia. I don't have any patients overseas.
Yeah, okay. Right. And when you're not working, what do you like getting up to in your free time?
I quite like a daily dose of nature, and that's going out to the park to walk, or the beach is 12 minutes from me. So sometimes I drive over and walk there too.
Hmm.
Sunlight, trees, stuff like that. Bit of exercise. Exercise is really the other thing. I can't be a lifestyle medicine physician without talking about exercise any chance I guess. You know, very, very clear reasons why human beings should move their bodies, not just for health reasons. You have a 2 hour early morning routine. I think you work some exercise into that, don't you, Jed?
I do. I love going for a run in the morning. Really boosts my mood and helps me to focus for the rest of the day.
Wow. Yeah.
What is your favorite type of nature in terms of, or an exercise? Going to the beach? Do you like swimming?
I'm not a great swimmer, so I don't go far into the ocean. When I go to the beach, it's generally just a jog on the boardwalk. I do like going for a jog. I do like going cycling as well. My main form of exercise still is resistance training. So basically, started out strength training and deadlifts, bench press, squats, things like that. Sort of a bit of kettlebell work as well. I think human beings should be dynamic in their movement. So that's what I try to work into my daily life.
It's interesting about the dynamic movements in terms of resistance training. How do you combine it in terms of activities like bench press, which are maybe less dynamic, and then kettlebell work would be a lot more dynamic?
Specifically, learning new moves is very important for me because you can get really strong in a bench press and sort of train your neuromuscular connections that way and get hypertrophy and strength specifically in your pectorals and the areas you train. But the thing about your joints and your musculature is that with movements like yoga, tai chi, and lots of kettlebell work as well, they sort of train new neural pathways and they train new movements. That in and of itself is incredibly powerful for the brain and for the body. So that's something I try to work into my weekly routine. I might put on like a YouTube video of someone doing Qigong and like brand new movements I've never tried before and just try to do them myself so that I don't get stuck in doing the same movement patterns I think to push myself.
Okay, I should probably do that myself as well. I've started doing resistance training over the last few years. It was something I never did in the past. I just would do body weight work. Now I've got some weights and I'm doing bench press, but I probably should get some kettlebells and also try some different moves from time to time. So do you think it would also help in terms of getting out of plateaus with strength? I found recently that I was plateauing on bench press, and then I started doing some pull-ups, and magically I was able to break out of the plateau.
Absolutely. If your goals are strength oriented, training I think they're called opposer muscles or the stabilizer muscles in the area would give you certain strength increment in that specific lift. If you're hoping to increase your push, that you can work a pull or even one of those big leg movements that really strengthen your core. And all of it together gives you increments towards any of the lifts that you're training. So always dynamic.
And also makes it more fun as well if it's a bit novel each time. which I think is important from an ADHD fitness perspective.
Yeah, you know it, that novelty and sometimes adding a bit of music can help you get started.
Hmm. Let's now talk about productivity tips. What's something that you do that helps
Uh-huh.
to optimize your productivity while you're working?
I think when it comes to like productivity hacks, there are like 101 of them online now, isn't there? I think specifically for my personal ADHD brain, one of the things that's worked best for me is what they call eating a frog, which is the nastiest thing I have to do that day that I'm dreading to do. I just like that's the first thing I try to tackle. And that doesn't necessarily work for everyone. For some people, it's better to do low hanging fruit, easier things to check off the list to get that motion rolling and to get the motivation. For me, the first thing is to do the nastiest thing in the morning. I also like having an outline for the day. So if I know I'm having 3 or 4 meetings, when I'm having them, I'll plan breaks in between, and then I'll time block the remaining time in between to sort of fit some deep work in if I can. So just having a view of what the day looks like before I start the day is really fantastic. It helps me avoid picking up my phone, immediately reading emails, immediately opening social media and getting into a doom scroll. Some people with ADHD might struggle with.
Yep, that was my struggle in the past. That's really interesting.
All of us.
I'm keen to dig into those 2 points a bit more because, as you said, some people don't like that approach of eat that frog. We ask this question in 2 parts. One is what is one technique that works for you, and the other part is what is a technique that doesn't work for you. And I think probably about 5 people on the show have said eat that frog doesn't work for them. But I think there's probably some nuance to it. How do you actually psych yourself up to doing that difficult task? And does it potentially align with the daily outline as well? Do you have some way the night before of breaking down that big task so it doesn't feel as intimidating when you start it the next day?
That's a really good question. I think I'll start with your last question first. Is there a way of breaking it down? For me personally, what works is if I describe the task or the first step of the task in an incredibly high detail. So I'll write specifically, potentially write this email to this person about this, and then I can start writing that and then go down that path. So if I make it more specific rather than writing, someone's name or like just the name of the appointment, I'll certainly take the first step if I'm directed to by myself last night. So that's how I do that. Now, sorry, what was the first part of your question, Jed?
In terms of how you get yourself mentally prepared for it, because I think describing it in great detail would certainly help, but is there anything else you do to get yourself into a high productivity state at the start of your day?
Yeah. How do you tackle the frog first thing in the day? The thing you definitely don't want to do is immediately when you wake up, jump and then try to eat the frog because cortisol levels wake us up. And the reason that is because, when we were early human beings, when we first woke up, we wanted that stress to run away from, a lion. If we heard a roar, we'd be woken up with that cortisol. Blood would rush to our limbs. We'd get adrenaline and we'd be able to run away. We don't want to have that kind of reaction with the brains we have. What we want to do is let things stabilize. And the way to do that really is to get some light movement, to hydrate, wash your face, and do the things you need to do. Small little things just to get yourself in a calm state where you're not stressed, you don't feel like you're in a rush, you're not in a fight or flight, and sort of ease yourself into the first step. It doesn't matter whether it's the worst thing to do today or the lower hanging fruit that you can knock off the list. I think just getting the first thing out of the way is a good start so that I see it like a slide. If I go down the wrong slide, I'll end up at the bottom of that slide. But if I make the conscious decision before I go down the slide to go down a different slide, I'll go down that one. It really requires me to make a lot of preparation and decision before I'm in the position to just go down default.
That's such a key part of it because it seems like the problem is in the morning I wake up and I don't feel motivated, but actually the problem might be that the night before insufficient preparation was done. So it sounds like you're also merging those two approaches in terms of people saying the momentum method works better. It sounds like in some ways you're suggesting that the momentum method works, but it doesn't have to be starting with low priority tasks. It can be starting with movement and other habits that actually set you up to be able to tackle the hard tasks. That's how I think about it
That's
myself.
exactly right. I think you hit that right. And the other thing I wanted to add to that too is people with ADHD struggle with productivity. But one of the things we cannot corner ourselves in is expecting that we function at 100% and get that productivity KPI, whatever that looks like for anyone every day. There are variances, in terms of whatever's going on psychologically with your relationships, whatever is going on physically. If you've had a bad night's sleep, I got a new kitten and she's currently jumping on my face every night. I'm bound to have a few bad days of sleep, and I can't wake up after 6 hours of bad sleep and expect myself to be in prime cognitive functioning. And that's what people shouldn't beat themselves up over. If you're having a slow day, have that slow day, but just do it anyway. That's one of the things that works for me as well.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really interesting point too, because I wonder about in terms of the bad days and the good days. I know that it's not possible to always, like you said, operate at 100%, but some of the suggestions you've been making earlier in terms of the 6 pillars and optimizing sleep, relationship, exercise, mental health, do you think they can make it, even if it's not 100% the same each day, but make it a bit more consistent if you're able to optimize all of those 6 pillars?
Absolutely. I think can get to a high level of functioning every day. What I want to encourage some people taking on that journey of optimizing those things as well is the result of you exercising today and tomorrow or for the next week. You might perceive them initially, but the result of eating better, or sleeping better, sleeping at the same time every night, of making sure your sleep hygiene is great, of practicing mindfulness, the initial results might be mildly perceptible. But if you wait 2 weeks or if you wait a few weeks, that all of that stuff snowballs. And what you find yourself doing is you're at a new level of functioning, but then at that new level, there's also variance. And so the goal I see it as is to build systems of movement, to build systems of balanced nutrition, to build systems of getting, adequate high sleep, good communication in your relationships, to build systems of meditation. And then all of these slowly bring you to higher and higher levels of functioning over time.
Mm, I love that. Like the idea of the system approach. What is some unhelpful advice that doesn't work for you?
Oh, yeah. Not unhelpful advice necessarily, but I find myself seeing a lot of hustle culture type content on social media these days as people that already struggle with activity and emotional regulation. It's not good to fall down the path of comparing ourselves to other people, of having certain expectations, of thinking that we have to work 10 hours a day to make X amount of money for us to finally be happy. I don't necessarily think that's how human beings should measure their lives. I think with someone who has struggled with the difficulties of ADHD all my life, getting to a place where I'm calm and productive is already a blessing. Getting the external message of, oh, you got to work every day, or you're not doing anything, you're busy. I don't think we should let these external messages or the urge to compare ourselves to other people get in the way of just living good life, plain and simple.
Mm, yeah, that's such an important message. It also makes me think about aiming for consistency. There can be days where it feels like I'm crushing it and maybe I should keep going because I'm riding the hyper focus high for 10 hours straight. I can do it for one day, but it's not possible for me to keep that up every day. Do you have any thoughts on that as well? On days where you're feeling like everything is flowing really well, do you stop yourself or do you surf that wave of hyperfocus?
As someone whose brain is deficient in dopamine, I love chasing that dopamine wave of hyper focus. I love this project. I'm going to build, so much, 6 hours of building today. But that's also a slippery slope because the reality is that not every day can be that way. We have to have a realistic approach. When we get that wave of excitement, yes, enjoy it, yes, pursue it, yes, do your best work. but also have the understanding that the couple of days following might come with a bit of a lull when you're slightly less productive, passionate, and engaged in that project. And then you still have to revisit it anyway. That's the struggle with what we do. On some days, we accomplish a lot. That does not mean on the days where we accomplish less, that we're any less people. It's just a natural variance.
Yeah, definitely. And it's okay to take a break, even on those days where we're struggling. So on that note, let's take a break and we'll be back with you shortly.
Hi there, Focus and Chillers. Are you ready to supercharge your knowledge in the realms of creativity, tech, and psychology? Come check out my fortnightly newsletter. In each edition, you'll get quick wins and actionable takeaways that you can put into practice right away. If this sounds like you, I'd love to have you as a reader. Subscribe for your fortnightly dose of insights. The link is in the show notes. And now, let's get back to the show.
All right, we're back from our break. Had some water and some nutrition. Now I'm keen to hear about your morning routine. What do you tend to do in the morning?
Oh, morning routine. I like morning routines. I try not to complicate it because I think if it's too long, I might back out of it in bed, especially when it's cold. So especially because it's cold in Victoria, morning routine starts the night before. I plan by keeping warm, comfortable clothes right beside my bed because that's the first thing. I won't get out of bed unless I can, immediately put on something that's comfortable, warm, and that I can function in. So after I get dressed, the 4 main parts of my morning routine before I get onto the nasty frog that I have to eat, as they say, is hygiene, fluid, movement, and protein. Hygiene, just washing my face, brushing my teeth, feeling fresh. Fluids, you get dehydrated overnight, so it's good to have a bit of fluid in the morning. Sometimes I like to add a bit of electrolytes or fiber supplement in there as well. Doesn't really matter. In terms of movement, I try to not complicate it. My movement first thing in the day isn't a proper workout. It's really to get blood flow into the joints, get my body nice and warm. So that can look like, 15 minutes on the stationary bike that I have at home, or just even some light stretching, some yoga. Sometimes if I'm feeling like I have lots of energy, I might do a 10-minute HIIT session like burpees, push-ups, but that's a rarity, maybe once a week. And lastly, the foundations of nutrition. I have a protein meal and it can look like protein oats or protein shake. Sometimes I make a couple of eggs to eat as well. I think starting your day off with a protein meal, it doesn't have to be first thing in the morning, but if you are eating something in the morning and you're not doing intermittent fasting, it's good to break fast with a high protein breakfast. So that's my morning routine. Certainly not as exciting as yours is.
No, it sounds pretty good. I like what you're saying about the warm clothes hack. I'd never really thought about that. That certainly is a barrier. My solution right now is to have my phone in the other room where the alarm clock goes off and I have to get up to turn it off. But I feel very cold as I'm doing that. Maybe I should also have one of my wearable blankets along the way so I can put that on and it doesn't feel as intimidating.
The phone in the other room is a great hack as well.
Yeah, it really reduces the likelihood that I'm going to just lie in bed and scroll. I get bored if I have to lie in bed with no stimulation.
Before you sleep and after you wake up are really nasty times to scroll. Specifically before you sleep, the blue light causes the suppression in melatonin. And so, the cycling into and out of your REM sleep will be affected. I highly discourage anyone who's doing scrolling in bed. And if they do, potentially use filters and put the brightness, I think, the lowest, and to keep it on a timer, maybe about 5-10 minutes at most, rather than to go for an hour.
Yep. Something I have to do too. The other question I had was, you've got a young child. How has that affected your morning routine? I'm asking because I'm hoping to have kids soon and I'm trying to prepare myself for what might come.
I think you misheard earlier. I have a kitten. Not a
kitten. Sorry.
My kitten's climbing all over my face. Yeah. Myself too. Me and you, Des, me and my partner are thinking of having a child. And, I think it takes an incredible amount of work to be mindful and to be a great parent for people who struggle with executive dysfunction. It requires even more planning and a lot more output of productivity to make sure that things are well in place and things, put the baby to bed at a certain time. You got to sort of plan everything ahead. And then that's something that I foresee will require a lot more out of me as well.
Yeah, I reckon you'll be an amazing father if that's a journey you want to take. I really liked what you were saying before about your dad being so caring for you when you were a kid and teaching you lessons when the teachers weren't able to. That's amazing that you were able to get that type of support, because there's a lot of people that I've spoken to who haven't had that experience from their parents, where their parents are not quite stapling things to their clothes, but probably doing that verbally. It's lovely you had that experience.
Yeah, I was very lucky. Once again, I think what you do is fantastic. Things first, you have to get out to all these people who have different brains to let them know that despite being different, despite maybe not being so accepted in their group of friends, you can actually live a great life.
100%. Right. Now let's talk about the other side of getting up in the morning. You talked a little bit already about your evening wind down routine in terms of not using the phone during that time and doing the outline for the following day. What else do you do in terms of your wind down routine?
I think the 3-2-1 is commonly quoted, which is like no big meal 3 hours before bed, and then try to avoid drinking fluids 2 hours before bed. Obviously, that's different for everyone. If you have heart problems or if you have kidney problems, that's not the same thing. If you need more fluids, and 1 hour before bed, don't use your phone. I think that's a great mnemonic to abide by, but you and I both know that oftentimes we are going late into the night, responding to emails, making sure that day after is prepared for. And even if you put in place structures, sometimes those structures fall apart. Mainly because life is busy and things get stressful and we sort of work ad hoc. But that's what I like to implement, being aware of things that can affect my sleep, specifically my ability to cycle in and out of REM sleep. The general guidance for sleep is between 7 to 9 hours. I try to avoid caffeine after midday. I try to avoid alcohol in general because that itself suppresses REM sleep. And alcohol, as you know, is commonly consumed in the evening. So people who drink alcohol in the evening on multiple days, even if it's a glass of red wine, potentially affecting their sleep. Cannabis is one of the things that some patients with ADHD medicate with or self-medicate with, and using cannabis too close to bedtime as well will affect the REM sleep. Nicotine, another thing, much like caffeine, alcohol, and cannabis. Basically, close to bedtime, take a tablet of magnesium, try to relax, practice mindfulness during the day. I could go on for hours about sleep gens if you let me drone on into all these little hacks that we can optimize. But having a good idea of the circadian rhythm, number one, number two, that human beings cycle in and out of REM sleep, and getting adequate sleep overall, those are the main key areas of really sleeping well and getting clarity the next day.
We do still have some time, so I think we could do some more droning about sleep. Maybe people will be listening to this as they're winding down. I'm curious, with the magnesium tablet, what type of magnesium do you find works best, and how do you take it without water? Or do you have to take it 2 hours before?
Yeah, I'm not that strict, but the 2 hour without drinks thing is generally for all the guys who struggle getting up to pee. But,
Okay.
I do have sips of water with the magnesium. I take high absorption magnesium glycinate, but I think it's also one where it exists in a couple of types of magnesium. Yeah, I think take the general guidance is take the highest absorption one, the one that's marketed that way I tend to trust. I understand magnesium's involved in something like 600 chemical reactions in the body. So it tends to just smoothen out biochemistry and neurotransmission. I find personally that I get much better sleeps with a magnesium supplement as well. More so a longer term supplementation rather than, a traditional sleep aid that people take. They want to take a tablet so they can feel drowsy, so that they can fall asleep. That's not generally how magnesium works. Just overall improves, the neurochemistry and puts your brain in a better place for sleep. I'm personally against prescription medications for sleep in the long term. Some examples are like benzodiazepines, zolpidem. Some people take antipsychotics just to help them sleep. I don't recommend a reliance on any kind of medication long term for sleep. I think there are many natural ways or more natural ways at least that you can optimize. Obviously, stress management is a big part of that.
Yeah, in terms of dealing with racing thoughts, which I think is often a challenge for getting to sleep, does that ever happen to you, or do you have any suggestions on dealing with that?
That's a great question. I think rumination specifically, so anxiety, which is like the cadence of the thought. You get a thought after another, and that can be quite alarming. I think when it comes to our physiology, we often try to bend it to our will, but sometimes if you find yourself experiencing racing thoughts, it's just slowing down, understanding that physiologically something's happening in your body that is making you feel uncomfortable. One of the easy ways to break out of a fight or flight reaction is to do breath work, because slowing down your breath and taking deeper breaths can engage the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest digest part of the human body, and engage those symptoms and activate the parts of your brain that will make you more relaxed and potentially help you not to ruminate. When it comes to myself, when I have racing thoughts, I just tell myself this is happening in my brain. It's going to happen for the next 30 minutes. Completely ignore every thought that's going to be thrown at you, and just let it run out. When you're tired, you fall asleep. I think oftentimes trying not to think a certain thing just puts you down a cycle. One of the things that makes people sleep worse is worrying about their sleep. It's a vicious cycle because you have poor sleep and then you're more worried about your poor sleep. You try all these things and you think all these things before you sleep. Oh, I'm going to sleep well, I'm going to sleep poorly, and further exacerbates your sleep. I think just starting by slowing down, accepting what's going on, and seeing if things improve over time.
Yeah, I can attest to that. The evenings where I start thinking, oh no, I'm not going to be able to get to sleep. At the evenings where it seems to take longer. I like that idea of just trying to ignore the thoughts. Sometimes the struggle for me is it feels like the thoughts are actually helpful. I sometimes will have a burst of creativity in the evening. I haven't really figured out a good solution for that. I sleep with my wife and I don't want to turn the light on to write them down. The latest thing I've been trying is sending myself a text message from my watch. And that sort of works, but it's very hard to type on my watch. Have you found any hacks for being able to capture those good ideas? Or when you're talking about it's going to take half an hour, are they all thoughts that you don't care about and it's just needless worry?
That's interesting. I do have occasional barrage of thoughts come flowing in, and some of them are useful. Majority of them are not useful and are just like meaningless ruminations. But you're right, some of them are useful. I sleep with my partner too, but I guess personally, I have a book that I keep beside my bed to write things down. I tend to write things down that way the night before. That is a good thing to think about. I might pay attention to that more when I have good ideas during these times where thoughts come flowing in, and try to pick some good ideas out.
Yeah, and I should go back to having a notebook next to me. I used to do that in the past and I wouldn't turn the light on. I just try and scribble vaguely legible writing. And then I'd look at it the next day and I can't really understand what I wrote, but it's sometimes understandable. Probably better than texting myself from my watch.
Wow. I don't have a smartwatch myself, but yeah.
Yeah. Do you have opinions on that? Is it helpful or unhelpful?
No, not at all. I think anything that is helpful to you can be helpful. Obviously, anything can also get out of hand, and that's why we have to navigate everything very carefully. In terms of exercise, nutrition, all the pillars as well, it's not useful to overthink, overanalyze, and try to perfect everything. I think the small foundational steps is like, are you getting at least 3 sessions of good quality exercise per week? Are you sleeping and waking up at the same time? Are you having balanced nutrition, right amounts of fruits and vegetables, adequate protein? Getting those foundations and then slowly improving upon them are the way to go, rather than sort of hyper focusing on everything. And just like that, like a smartwatch, like any distraction, playing music while we work, things can be useful and things can be out of hand. And we just have to navigate those things carefully, I think.
That's a great way to wrap up the show. Just before we do that, where's the best place for people to find you online?
For people who are interested in what I do, they can read more about me at Whole Being Medical, at WHOLE EING Medical. They can find out more about what I do.
Wonderful, and we'll include that link in the show notes. And do you have any final words or asks for the audience?
I think I'll leave it with a bit of a meme. Don't get lost in the source. Just do the next right thing. Because you can very easily get overwhelmed. So don't get lost by it all. Do the next right thing.
Love it. Wise words. We'll wrap the show with that. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, Jerry.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Focus and Chill podcast. To listen to other episodes, jump onto podcast.focusbear.io. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or you know someone who'd be a good fit, email us at team@focusbear.io. Otherwise, stay focused, stay chilled, and peace out.